Picture a city built on a swamp, not metaphorically, not built on shaky foundations or built on corruption, though both of those are also true. I mean literally constructed on top of a river delta that sits below sea level, surrounded by water on three sides, slowly sinking into the mud like a beautiful rotting wedding cake that someone left out in the August rain. Now fill it with 100,000 people who speak 4 languages simultaneously, who eat food that would make a French chef weep and an English one faint, who bury their dead in above-ground tombs because the ground is too wet to hold a coffin properly, who have invented at least 3 distinct social hierarchies based on exactly how far back your great-grandmother could trace her freedom. Add the smell of the Mississippi River at low tide. That is not a clean smell, I want to be clear about that. Add jasmine climbing over iron lacework balconies. Add the sound of a piano coming through a door that's closed but not quite closed enough. Add summer heat so thick and wet that your clothes are damp before you've walked a single block, and you have New Orleans in 1857. That's where we're going tonight. Not to the French Quarter as a tourist, not to stand on Bourbon Street looking at the pretty architecture and eating beignets, which yes, did exist in 1857, and yes, they were just as good. We're not visiting, we're living there. One afternoon, one woman, everything she would have seen and touched and survived between the hours of noon and midnight. And when I say surviving, I'm not being dramatic, or only slightly dramatic. I make these history stories, and I genuinely have no idea if any of you actually sleep to them, or if you're all just very specific people who like hearing about women who existed in the strange, impossible gap between freedom and captivity in antebellum Louisiana. Either way, get comfortable, pull your blanket up. The air here is so wet and warm it'll feel like someone's breathing on you, and that's actually accurate to the period. Here we go. Your eyes open, and it is noon. This is the first thing that's different about your life. The thing that separates you from the washerwoman in the street below, and the market girl hauling cabbages, and the free black seamstress 3 doors down, who has been awake since 4 in the morning. You sleep until noon, or close to it. Not because you are lazy, not because you are lucky, because you worked until 3 o'clock this morning, and because the work you do happens in the dark, and because the world that uses you doesn't need you until the sun goes back down. So you sleep while the city is loudest, which sounds like something poetic until you understand that you have no choice. The room is not dark. The shutters on the window are wooden and old, and they don't close all the way, and even if they did, nothing stops the heat from getting in. It comes through the walls, it comes up through the floor. It sits in the corners of the room and breathes on you like a dog that wants something. The ceiling is high, 12 feet at least, which is not comfort exactly, but it's something. The houses in this part of New Orleans are built with high ceilings because someone 100 years ago understood that heat rises, and if you can give the heat somewhere to go above your head, the bottom few feet of air where people actually live is fractionally more bearable. Fractionally. You can hear the street below without even trying. It comes up through the window gaps, through the floorboards, through the plaster walls as if the walls aren't there at all. A man selling pralines. His voice is a rhythm more than a sentence. Pralines, prolines, bells, pralines. Over and over, the same cadence. Morning and midday and afternoon, until you could hear it in your sleep, which you often do. A cartwheel hitting the joint in the banquette, where 2 slabs of limestone don't quite meet. That particular lurch and clatter, the sound of the horse adjusting its weight. From somewhere closer, a voice arguing in French, Creole French, which is not exactly the French they speak in Paris. It's softer in some places, harder in others, with sounds borrowed from Spanish and from West African languages, and from 100 years of people learning to talk to each other in a city that belonged to 3 empires before it was a state. It's a language that was built for negotiation, for compromise, for saying one thing and meaning 3 others. You understand it without thinking about it. You've understood it your whole life. There is a smell in the room. There are always smells in this room. You have learned to separate them the way you separate sounds. Background from foreground, permanent from temporary, relevant from ignorable. The permanent smell is the room itself. Old wood, old plaster, the faint traces of perfume from everyone who's ever slept in this bed, layered so deep into the mattress ticking that you'd need to burn it to get rid of them. Lavender and something heavier. Civet, maybe. Something animal. The temporary smell this morning is coffee from downstairs. Chicory coffee. Dark enough to stand a spoon in, brewed by Celeste, who keeps the kitchen and who has opinions about everything, and shares them with everyone whether they asked or not. Celeste has been in this house longer than you have, longer than Madame Renard has owned it, possibly. Celeste is the kind of woman who outlasts everything, who will probably be making chicory coffee in this kitchen after every other person in the building has died or moved on, or simply disappeared the way women in your position tend to disappear. The third smell is the river, always the river. The Mississippi is 3 blocks away, maybe 4. You can't see it from this window, but you've never needed to see it to know it's there. It has its own presence in this city, a mass of brown water a mile wide and 30 feet deep at the levee, moving with a deliberateness that isn't slowness, but something more like certainty. The river is certain. The river knows where it's going. The river does not ask permission. At low tide, and it's low tide now, you can tell by the smell, the Mississippi gives back some of what it carries. The mud and the rot and the cargo that falls off boats and the things that go into the water and don't come back out. All of that is in the air this morning like a low note under everything else. Not unpleasant exactly, just present. The way the heat is present. The way the sound of the praline cellar is present. You have been here 2 years and you have stopped noticing the river smell most of the time. This is either adaptation or defeat, and you are not always sure which. You sit up. The sheet is stuck to your back. You peel it off, and the air on your skin feels almost cool for half a second before it settles back into the same thick warmth. Your hair is loose, spread on the pillow, and it's damp at the roots from sleeping in this heat. Later you will spend 40 minutes dressing it properly, pinning it up in ways that took you a year to learn and that you still sometimes get wrong. Your name is Celeste Beaumont, which is a small private irony you share with no one, having the same name as the cook downstairs. That's not your real name, actually. Your real name is the one your mother gave you, the one that belongs to the family, to the house where you grew up in the Tremy neighbourhood 2 miles from here and also a world away. But that name doesn't belong in this house, and this house doesn't belong to that name, and you made your peace with that arrangement 18 months ago, and you don't think about it most mornings. Most mornings. You're 21 years old. You're what New Orleans in 1857 would call a placé, or working toward it, depending on how charitable you're being with yourself on a given afternoon. You're a free woman of colour. Your grandmother was born in Saint-Domingue, what used to be Saint-Domingue before the revolution that made it Haiti, before the 40,000 refugees who fled the burning island and arrived in New Orleans in 1809 and changed this city permanently, irrevocably. doubled its population of free people of colour overnight and brought with them a culture so specific and so layered that it still shapes everything here. The food and the religion and the music and the complex social arrangements that white people from outside Louisiana look at and say they don't understand. And they're right, they don't. Your grandmother arrived with nothing. She made arrangements. She built something. Her daughter, your mother, built on top of what she made. And you have been told your whole life, in the specific, careful way that women in your position are told things, that this is how it works, that this is the only way it works, that the world offers you one path and you can either take it or you can wash other people's laundry for the rest of your life and die with nothing. You have chosen this path. You're not sure on certain quiet afternoons that you had a choice. But that is an afternoon thought. And the afternoon is not here yet. The basin on the washstand has water in it from last night, slightly less than fresh, slightly more than grey. You pour in a little from the pitcher beside it. Celeste fills it every morning, has done so every day since before you arrived. One of the small and unacknowledged kindnesses that keep this house functioning, and you wash your face. The water is warm already. There is no cold water in August in New Orleans unless you pay specifically for ice, and ice costs money that goes somewhere else. The water on your face feels like washing with water that has already been thinking about becoming humid. It doesn't quite rinse clean. It leaves your skin feeling like the air feels, which is to say damp and slightly unresolved. You dry your face on the cloth that hangs beside the basin. The cloth is clean. This is not a small thing. Cleanliness in this house is a professional matter, not just a personal one. And Madame Renard, who you will meet properly in a few minutes when you go downstairs, has opinions about cleanliness that approach the theological. Everything in this house is clean. The floors are swept. The linens are changed. The windows are wiped down regularly with vinegar water that keeps them streaked in one kind of light and clear in another. The women who live here are clean. Their hair is clean. Their clothes are clean. In 1857, New Orleans, being visibly, demonstrably clean, is a marker of status so important that it verges on the sacred. Especially for women like you, especially in a city where yellow fever killed 4,000 people just 8 years ago, where cholera is a word that still makes people flinch, where the water supply is so comprehensively contaminated that drinking from the wrong cistern is genuinely one of the city's primary methods of killing people. You're clean, that matters. Your dress is hanging on the back of the door, the everyday one, the pale blue cotton that's meant for afternoons and the interior of the house, not for the street. Not yet. You'll change before you go out, if you go out, if Madame allows it. The afternoon depends on factors that are not entirely yours to determine. You step into it and do the buttons yourself, reaching around to your back, getting most of them, leaving the bottom 2 for Josie next door to do when she's up. Josie is 23 and from Natchitoches, which is a small city 5 hours north of New Orleans, that she describes with the specific combination of nostalgia and contempt that people reserve for places they loved and had to leave. Josie has been in this house for 4 years. She knows things you don't yet know, and she shares some of them freely, and guards the others with the quiet fierceness of a person who has learned that knowledge is the only property nobody can take from you. The stairs creak on the 3rd step and the 7th. You skip them both by habit. The house is 2 stories plus attic, Creole townhouse style, with the rooms arranged around a central corridor and the kitchen in the back courtyard, where the fire won't burn the main house down if something goes wrong, which in this city's history something has, repeatedly, the Great Fire of 1788. and then another one in 1794. 2 fires in 6 years that burned most of the old Spanish colonial buildings and left the city with the French Quarter, as we know it now, which is actually Spanish colonial architecture because that's what got rebuilt. The iron lacework on the balconies outside is not French. It's Spanish. The name is wrong. The neighbourhood is not the French Quarter in anything but nickname. You know this because Madame Renard told you. She tells you many things. Education is part of the arrangement, or at least her version of it. The kitchen smell hits the bottom of the stairs. Coffee and something sweet. Cornbread, maybe. Or the bread pudding that Celeste makes with yesterday's bread and whatever's available. Vanilla if there is some. Nutmeg if there isn't. A pour of whiskey, because Celeste believes whiskey improves most things, which is a philosophy you've noticed the city as a whole seems to share. Madame Renard was already at the table. She's always already at the table when you come downstairs. You've not yet seen her sleep, or just woken up, or less than fully assembled. She is 52 years old and looks 45, which is either genetics or a lifetime of strategic maintenance, and you suspect both. She's a woman of colour, light-skinned, which in this city's complicated taxonomy means she has navigated her entire life through a series of doors that were open to her and closed to women slightly darker, and she knows exactly which doors those are, and she knows that they can close at any time, and she has spent 52 years ensuring they stay open through a combination of money and comportment, and the particular kind of social intelligence that other people sometimes call coldness, and she calls survival. She made her arrangements at 17. The man who made them with her died of fever in 1842. She took what he left her, the house, some furniture, some money. Not as much as she'd expected, and more than she feared, and she built this from it. Not a brothel, she would be very clear about that distinction if anyone was careless enough to use that word in her presence. A house, a place where certain arrangements are made and maintained and conducted with dignity. This is not semantics exactly, or not only semantics. There are establishments in New Orleans in 1857 where the arrangements are not conducted with dignity, and Madame Renard knows the difference, and she needs you to know it too. She looks up when you come in. She doesn't say good morning, because it isn't morning. This has been her only comment on your sleeping schedule for the 2 years you've been here, and the fact that she makes it through silence rather than words is actually more effective than if she said something. Sit, she says. You sit. Celeste puts a cup in front of you without being asked. The coffee is the colour of very dark wood, and the smell is dense and slightly bitter, and you have had it every day for 2 years, and you will drink it until you die, and never want anything else. Monsieur Arsenault is coming at 7. You nod. You know this already. Monsieur Arsenault comes every Thursday. Before that, Madame continues, there are some things. There are always some things. The afternoons in this house run on a logic that is entirely their own, separate from the logic of the city outside and the logic of the night that comes after. The afternoon is the hinge. It's the space between what you are in private and what you become in public, or what you are in public and what you become in private, depending on how you arrange the categories. Madame picks up a small card from the table and places it in front of you. It's a calling card. Cream paper, engraved letters, Monsieur H. Villeneuve, with an address on Esplanade Avenue. He left this yesterday afternoon, Madame says, while you were asleep. You pick up the card. The paper is very good quality, heavy between your fingers. the letters slightly raised where the engraver pressed into the plate. Esplanade Avenue is one of the streets where the Creole upper class built their houses after the Americans started flooding into the Garden District, and the downtown began to divide between the old French Creole society upriver and the new Anglo-American money downriver. Esplanade Avenue is old money, old Creole money, which is a different texture from American money. "Do you know him?" Madame asks. "I've seen him at the Rouquette Ball last spring. What's your impression?" You think about this. The Rouquette Ball was one of the private subscription balls, not the Quadroon Ball exactly. That institution was in decline by 1857, or more precisely was being conducted more quietly, less officially. The famous Orleans Ballroom on Orleans Street had been sold to the Catholic Church, who turned it into a school. So the formal institution had changed while the underlying social practice continued in smaller, less public venues. But the same principle. A gathering where the social contract of plaçage was performed and observed and negotiated. Monsieur Villeneuve had been polite. He had danced well. He had not said anything wrong. He seemed serious, you say. He is serious, Madame says. He's also 46, a widower, one son, grown, a trading business, cotton factors. She pauses. He is serious. The question is whether he's the right kind of serious. This is the calculus that nobody outside this world fully understands. The mathematics that isn't written down anywhere but that every woman in this house has learned or is learning. It's not simple. It's never simple. There are men who are serious in the sense of being reliable, of honouring the arrangement, of providing consistently and treating you as something other than furniture they're renting. And there are men who are serious in the sense of being controlling, of seeing the arrangement as purchase rather than contract, of being the kind of serious that gets heavier over time rather than lighter. The difference is not always visible from a calling card. You put the card back on the table. "I'll meet him," you say. Madame nods once, which is approval, and then she's done with that subject and on to the next one. This is how mornings work. You understand, after 2 years, that the afternoons are managed. They are not quite free and not quite bound. You exist in the hours between noon and midnight, in a state that has no precise word in English. The French come closer, the Creole French closer still. You belong to an arrangement that hasn't been finalized yet, which means Madame still has authority over your time, but the authority has limits, and the limits have been tested enough that you both know roughly where they are. You drink your coffee. Josie comes downstairs 20 minutes later, her hair still loose, her dress less tidy than yours, and she sits across from you and takes the cup that Celeste has ready, before her body has fully settled into the chair. Josie's eyes are still mostly closed. "The Villeneuve card," Josie says. "You saw it." "He's not bad," she says. "I've heard." "From who?" "From Lisette, who knew a woman who had an arrangement with his cousin." A pause. Josie opens her eyes the rest of the way. "His cousin was not good, but Lisette said the Villeneuves as a family are not bad, which is a different category of information. This is how information moves in your world. Not through newspapers, not through official channels, not through anything that would be recognized as a network from the outside. It moves through women, through conversations between women in houses like this one, and women in other arrangements, and women who are seamstresses or teachers or laundresses, and who know things and share them with the right people in the right moments. It's an information system that is invisible to the men who benefit from it or suffer from it. They would be astonished to know how much you know about them before they've said a word. Outside, the praline seller has been replaced by a knife grinder. his wheel making a sound like a long, slow complaint, high-pitched and persistent. A knife against a whetstone sounds nothing like anything else, and you can hear it from 2 streets away, hear it moving as he moves, the sound rising and falling as he turns corners. The heat is a presence in the room, solid, patient. Celeste brings bread and a small pot of fig preserves and puts it on the table without ceremony, because ceremony would be wasted on a morning meal in this house, and because Celeste has no time for ceremony, she has bread to see to, and 4 women to feed, and a schedule that began at 4 in the morning and will not end until 10 tonight, and she allocates her energy accordingly. You eat standing, not because you have to. You have a chair, Madame has a chair, Josie has a chair, but standing at the window is a habit you developed in the first months here and never lost, a way of watching the street while eating, cataloguing what's moving and where and at what speed. The street at noon in August. The banquettes. That's what New Orleanians call sidewalks, the French word, because in 1857 everything here has 2 names, the English one and the French one, and depending on who you're talking to, you use one or the other, and getting it wrong is a social marker as reliable as a mismatched shoe. The banquettes are limestone slabs mostly in this neighbourhood, though in some blocks they've replaced them with wood planks that warp in the heat and split in the wet and have to be replaced constantly. The limestone is better but uneven, and you've learned to walk on them without looking down, the way you learn any landscape you live with long enough. The people on the street at noon, a man in a brown coat too heavy for the heat, walking fast, going somewhere. 3 women, dark-skinned, carrying baskets, probably domestic servants heading from the market to an employer's house in the Garden District. A white man on a horse, the horse moving slowly in the heat, both of them looking like they resent their circumstances. 2 children chasing something, a dog maybe, their bare feet slapping the stone. A nun, black habit, no visible sign of suffering from the heat, which seems unfair. And across the street, in the shadow of the balcony of the house opposite, a girl you don't recognise, maybe 16, sitting on the stoop with her knees together and her hands in her lap, and her eyes moving the way eyes move when a person is watching something, and not sure yet what they're watching. She arrived 3 weeks ago, you think. You've seen her twice from this window. She came from somewhere, Baton Rouge maybe, or one of the plantations upriver, with someone who is not currently visible, and she is trying to understand what this street is before she decides how to live on it. You recognise that project. You did it yourself. The fig preserves are good. They're always good. Celeste makes them in June from the fig tree in the courtyard, a tree that is very old. Madame says her own Madame planted it, which would make it from the 1820s, which means it has survived yellow fever and floods and 2 major hurricanes, and the general hostility of a climate that destroys everything eventually. And the preserves are the specific sweetness of figs cooked in sugar until they're translucent, with a little lemon to keep them from being too sweet. You spread them on the bread with a small knife, and eat them, and watch the girl across the street and think about the first week you spent in this house, the particular texture of learning where you were. You were not scared, exactly, or not in the way people from outside might imagine. You had been prepared. The women in your family had been preparing you in their way for years. The specific education that doesn't happen in schoolrooms, the knowledge of what options exist and what each costs and what each provides, and which madams are reputable and which are not, and what signs to look for in an arrangement that suggest it will hold, and what signs suggest it won't. You are not walking into ignorance. You were walking into the system you'd been told about your whole life. The fear was different from what you expected. It was quieter. It sat in the back of your chest like a stone and didn't announce itself. It was the fear of the particular, not the fear of the general. You knew what the thing was in principle. The question was what your specific version of it was going to be. That question is still being answered. Madame finishes her coffee. She puts the cup down with the particular decisiveness that indicates she is moving from sitting to acting, and she stands, and she looks at you with an expression that is not quite warm but is not cold either. It's something more precise, something that contains information about what you're doing here and what it costs and what it's for. Veronique needs her hair pressed before this evening, she says. She can't do it herself, and I have the accounts to do. Can you? Veronique is the fourth woman in the house, arrived last year from a family of free coloureds from Natchez. She is 17. She's the reason the girl across the street looked familiar. Same age, same expression, though Veronique is further along in whatever process this is. Yes, you say. This is what an afternoon looks like. Not what you might think. Not what novels written by white men in this period imagine. Not hours of languor and perfume and being decorative. You press Veronique's hair with a hot iron while she sits very still and tries not to flinch when the heat gets too close to her scalp, which it does, because pressing requires heat, and heat requires proximity to burning, and there is no way to do this work without that risk. The iron is a flat pressing iron that you heat on the small brazier in Veronique's room and test by holding it an inch from your wrist. You can feel if it's right. There's a particular quality of heat that's correct for pressing, and anything above it is damage. And you work in sections, holding the hair taut with one hand and running the iron with the other. The smell of hot hair and the faint chemical smell of the oil you work through it first. Veronique doesn't speak while you work. She's learned that. You didn't teach her, Josie did, with the specific efficiency Josie brings to most things. The room smells like hair, and the oil and underneath it the inevitable August heat smell, the sweet rotten smell of a city that never cools. And through the window the praline seller has come back, a different route, or the same route circled back. Bell's pralines, and a church bell somewhere, probably St. Louis Cathedral 3 blocks over, striking the half hour. The cathedral bells in New Orleans strike all day. They've been striking all day since 1794. If you live in the French Quarter, which you do, you live inside those bells the way you live inside the weather. They're not background exactly. They're part of the structure of the day, the sound that marks the hours, the sound that was there before you and will be there after you and doesn't care about any of it. Am I presentable? Veronique asks when you're finished. You look at her hair, smooth and shaped correctly, and won't move in the heat the way it would if you'd left it as it was. Yes, you say. She touches it with 2 fingers very lightly. You're good at this, she says. You have good hair, you tell her. Which is true. The pressing is easier when the hair has a certain texture. Veronique's does. I wish I didn't need it pressed, she says. It comes out quiet, almost not there. The statement of a person who isn't quite complaining but is acknowledging something true. You don't say anything to that. There's nothing to say that she doesn't already know. The requirement to press her hair is part of the same system that has her in this house at 17, that has you pressing her hair at 21, that has Madame Renard managing all of it from downstairs with her cup of chicory coffee and her ledger. You didn't build the system, you live in it. Go show Madame, you say. She goes. You put the iron back on the brazier and sit on the edge of her bed for a moment and look at your hands. The The pressing iron left a faint red mark on the inside of your right index finger, just below the second knuckle, where the heat came closer than intended. Not a burn, a warning. The skin is faintly pink and will fade in an hour. Your hands are not the hands of a woman of leisure. They don't look like the hands of the women at the balls, the ones who wear gloves to protect skin that's never done manual work. Your hands have pressed hair and kneaded bread when Celeste needed help, and wrung out wet laundry, and repaired torn hems with a needle, and mended things generally, because in this house things are maintained, and maintenance is labour, and labour is done by whoever is available. Your mother has the same hands. You remember thinking, when you were very young, that her hands looked like they belonged to a different body than the rest of her, which was beautiful and careful and maintained. Now you understand. The hands are the truth. Everything else is performance. That's not entirely cynical. The performance matters. You're not dismissing it. But you know which part is which. You go downstairs. The courtyard at the back of the house has a cistern, and the old fig tree and a small kitchen garden that Celeste tends with the focused energy she brings to everything. Basil and thyme and something Celeste calls herbe à tout maux, herb for all evils, which is a Creole medicinal plant used for fevers and headaches and general protest against the physical world. In the corner of the garden, an oleander bush, which is very beautiful and also extremely poisonous in all its parts, which Celeste knows and has mentioned specifically to every new person who comes through this house, not as a threat, as information. In 1857 New Orleans, a woman needs to know which plants will kill her. The courtyard is the one place in this house that feels genuinely private. Madame comes out here in the evening sometimes and sits in the old rocking chair that came with the house. Josie comes out to smoke, which she does in short, focused intervals, a clay pipe she keeps in her room, the tobacco strong enough that you can smell it from inside. You come out here when the inside of the house gets heavy with too many people and too many hours, and you need to remember that there's sky above New Orleans. There is sky, even in August, even through the coal smoke and the river haze, even through the general atmosphere of a city that generates its own weather, there's sky. This afternoon it's a white-blue colour that means more heat, the kind of sky that has made its decision and is not changing its mind. You sit in the rocking chair, which Josie hasn't taken yet, and you let yourself have 15 minutes. This is a skill. You've been learning it for 2 years, the skill of allocating rest, of claiming the small pockets of time that nobody's currently using and inhabiting them fully before they close again. There's no guaranteed rest in this life. Madame doesn't schedule it. The afternoon moves around, demands that can appear without warning, a client whose timing changes, a delivery that needs to be received, a repair that needs to happen before evening. So you learn to rest in 15-minute increments in the spaces between. The fig tree is heavy with green figs, not yet ripe, hard and dense. By September they'll be soft and purple, and Celeste will be in the kitchen for 3 days making preserves and telling the figs what she thinks of them. She talks to the figs while she works. She talks to the bread when she's kneading it. You've asked her about this once, and she said that food has a kind of life in it and benefits from being spoken to directly, which is either a very old Creole belief or something Celeste invented for herself. And either way it seems to work because her cooking is some of the best you've ever had. The basil smells like basil. That's one of the few smells in New Orleans that doesn't layer with something else, that stays clean and clear. Fresh basil, green and sharp and a little like licorice. a smell that cuts through the heat. You pull a leaf off the nearest stem and crush it between your fingers and bring it to your face and breathe. There. That. Josie comes out with her pipe and raises an eyebrow at the rocking chair. I have 5 more minutes, you say. I'm not arguing, she says, and sits on the kitchen step. She lights the pipe with a small piece of ember she carried out from the kitchen on a bit of folded tin, a system she's developed for exactly this purpose, and she draws on it, and the smoke goes up through the fig tree and the oleander and into the white-blue sky. What do you think of the Villeneuve card, she says, is not really a question. I don't know yet. Cotton factors do well, Josie says. They've done well since the city was built. Cotton doesn't stop. She pauses, except when it does. Everything stops eventually. This is the reality of the arrangement as an economic proposition, which is what it is, which is part of what it is. An arrangement is only as stable as the man's finances and health and interest, and none of those are guaranteed. Women who made arrangements with men who died of fever in the epidemic years. Women who made arrangements with men whose businesses failed. Women who made arrangements with men who simply chose to stop honouring them. All of those women have stories that end in ways that don't bear extended examination in the early afternoon. You're not naive about this. Your grandmother wasn't naive about this. Your mother, who made a different choice, a legal marriage, a man who worked as a carpenter, a house in the Tremy neighbourhood that is theirs. Even your mother understands this calculus because she grew up watching women navigate it. The question is not whether it's risky. Everything is risky. The washerwoman with her arms in boiling water for 12 hours a day has a different risk and the same precarity. The free black seamstress 3 doors down has better daytime freedom and worse economic stability. The enslaved woman 2 streets over has no freedom and no stability and no arrangement that can't be dissolved at the will of someone else, which is the fact that sits underneath everything in this city in 1857, the fact that makes your freedom relative and the word free complicated in ways that it shouldn't have to be complicated. You are free, legally, technically, in ways that matter and ways that are, some afternoons, harder to feel. He seemed like he knew what he wanted, you say finally about Villeneuve. That's not always good, Josie says. It's not always bad either. She makes a sound that is not agreement or disagreement, just acknowledgement that there are positions on this question. You give her the rocking chair. The afternoon is moving. You can feel it in the light, the angle changing, the shadow of the balcony above starting to extend across the courtyard. 2 hours until Madame will want you back inside for the serious business of preparation, the ritual of the evening. I'm going to the market, you say. Josie looks at you. Madame, no? I'm going to ask. You go ask. Madame is in the front room with her ledger, the big leather-bound book where the accounts are kept. The accounts of this house are not simple. There are household expenses, which Celeste tracks in her own way and reports to Madame weekly, and there are the business arrangements, which are more complex, which involve the specific financial agreements that structure the relationships with clients, and which are documented with the care of contracts because in their way they are contracts. Madame's handwriting in the ledger is very precise. She writes in a mixture of French and English that she switches between depending on which is more efficient for a given entry. You knock on the open door. The market, you say, the French market, an hour. She doesn't look up from the ledger. Take Josie. Josie's smoking. Then take your hat, don't be back after 4. A pause. Buy some good tomatoes if they have any. Celeste has been using the tired ones. You take your hat. Now. This is the part of the afternoon that is yours, more yours than anything else in the day, the hour of permission. Walking to the market is not liberation. You walk within a set of invisible constraints that shape every step, that determine which streets you take and how you respond to people you encounter and what you can and cannot do with the hour. But it is something real. It is air. The hat is necessary, and not only for the sun. The sun is brutal. August sun in New Orleans is a physical assault that accumulates across the day and leaves you with a headache behind your eyes by evening if you aren't careful. But the hat is also social signalling, part of the vocabulary of presentation that you've learned and that you use every time you leave this house. The right hat, the right dress, the right posture, the right walk. These things communicate category and status and affiliation in ways that are legible to this city, even if they're invisible to outsiders. Your dress for the street is better than the morning cotton. Not the evening clothes. Nothing close, but a better day dress. A darker blue with white trim at the collar and cuffs, clean and pressed, and of obviously decent quality. The hat matches. Your hair is done. Your shoes are good leather, not worn through, and make a specific sound on the limestone banquette that is the sound of someone who belongs somewhere. You know what you look like on this street. You've spent 2 years learning how to look like what you need to look like in each moment. You walk west on Rue Royale, then turn toward the river. The French market is at the riverfront. Has been there since before New Orleans was officially a city, since before the French or the Spanish or the Americans owned it, when it was a meeting place for the Choctaw and other nations who traded here before anyone else. By 1857 it's a long-covered arcade of stalls, open-sided, running parallel to the levee, and the smell of it hits you from half a block away. The smell of the French market is not one smell. It is the democratic collision of everything. Meat, first and most aggressive, raw and in various states of freshness, the butcher stalls with their hanging carcasses and their sawdust-covered floors. Then fish, which in New Orleans means gulf fish and river fish, catfish and speckled trout and redfish and shrimp from the lake, and the fish have their own sharp smell that is not the smell of fish in inland markets. It's saltier, more alive, the smell of water that runs to the ocean. Then coffee, always coffee. There's a coffee stand near the middle of the arcade where a man named Jerome has been selling café au lait from a tin urn every morning for at least 15 years. And the smell is so deep in the market structure that you could find that stand blindfolded. Vegetables, tomatoes stacked in pyramids, their specific summer smell of warm green and acid. Okra, long pods in deep green, still damp from being rinsed. Merleton squash, pale green and oddly shaped. Bitter oranges from the trees that grow all over this city. The ones that fell off and are being sold in a barrel by a small boy who keeps looking up from his barrel to watch the other vendors. Flowers. Somebody always has flowers at the French market. Today it's a woman with a basket of tuberoses, and the tuberose smell, waxy and sweet and heavy enough to press down on you, cuts across everything else in the market and makes the air briefly and entirely sweet. You move into the market and the market moves around you. This is what it means to be in public in New Orleans in 1857 as a free woman of colour. You have legal right to be here, you have practical familiarity with this space, and you navigate it with a specific awareness that is not paranoia and is not fear, but is something in between. A continuous peripheral attention, a knowledge of who is where and what expression they have, and whether the space you're in is safe, in the particular way that safety is defined in this city at this time. Not all the dangers are obvious. Some are official. The Black Code, Code Noir, has been revised and revised and revised since it was first issued in 1724, but it remains the legal structure that governs your existence in this state, that defines the freedoms you have and the ones you don't, that requires free people of colour to carry proof of their freedom status at all times, or risk being treated as escaped slaves, which is a risk you take seriously, which everyone you know takes seriously. You have papers. They're back at the house, in the small wooden box under your bed that contains what's yours. Your papers, a little money, some letters. You don't carry them to the market because the chance of losing them is greater than the chance of needing them here, where you're known, where Madame Renard's house is known, where your presence on this street has a context that makes the papers mostly unnecessary. Mostly. You stop at the tomato stall. The tomatoes are the real kind. The good ones. Not the pale, sad ones from the tired soil, but the deep red ones from somewhere upriver with soil that has something in it. Creole tomatoes, the specific variety that tastes like summer concentrated into vegetable form. You pick one up and press your thumb against the skin. Yields under pressure. Ripe. The smell when you lift it is warm and green and slightly acid. "Those just came in this morning," says the woman at the stall. She's a plump Cajun woman about 60, with forearms that suggest a life of physical work and an expression of general goodwill. Best of the season. How much for a dozen? The negotiation takes 2 minutes. It's cheerful negotiation. The kind both parties enjoy because nobody is actually in conflict. They're just performing a price discovery process. You land where you expected to land, which is about where she expected you to land. You know this market. She knows you. You put the tomatoes in the basket you carried from the house. Then you walk, not buying, walking. This is the actual purpose of the hour, the part that's yours in a way that buying tomatoes for Celeste is not, the part that is movement for movement's sake, observation for observation's sake, the act of being a person in a city rather than a person in a room. The levee is visible from the market just on the other side, and beyond it the river. You go up the slope of the levee. It's built up, elevated above the surrounding city, because the river would otherwise be above the level of the streets, which is one of the permanent uncanny facts of New Orleans, that the river runs above you, that you live in a bowl, and you stand at the top and look at the water. The Mississippi at midday in August. Brown. Immense. Moving. It doesn't look dramatic from here. It looks the way power looks when it doesn't need to perform itself. Just wide and brown and continuous, moving south toward the Gulf with the patience of something that has been moving for 10,000 years, and will be moving for 10,000 more regardless of what anyone does on its banks. There are ships. Of course there are ships. In 1857, New Orleans is the second busiest port in the United States after New York, which is a fact that is visible from this levee in the sheer quantity of vessels at anchor or at the wharves. Flatboats from upriver, loaded with goods that came down from the Ohio Valley, the agricultural produce of the entire interior of the continent that finds its way to sea via New Orleans. Ocean-going steamers with their paddle wheels and their black smokestacks, running routes to Havana and Vera Cruz and Liverpool and New York. Sailing ships still, because steam hasn't entirely replaced sail yet in 1857. Schooners and brigs that move under canvas when the wind is right. Foreign ships. You can sometimes tell by the configuration, by the flag, by the sound of the language being shouted from deck to deck. All of this is cotton and sugar and coffee and tobacco, and underneath all of it, unnamed and present the way the river smell is present, the trade in human beings. New Orleans in 1857 is the largest slave market in the United States. The auction houses are nearby. The slave pens, establishments where enslaved people are held before sale, are within walking distance of where you're standing. The ships that dock here carry human cargo in both directions, the transatlantic slave trade being technically illegal, but the domestic trade being thoroughly legal, enslaved people from the Upper South being sold down to Louisiana's sugar and cotton plantations as conditions in those states worsen. You know this. Everyone knows this. It is not discussed in public in polite company. It is the foundation of the city, and the foundation of the economy, and the foundation of the specific social hierarchy that puts you exactly where you are. A free woman of colour in a city where the word free has borders. The river moves. The sun is starting to angle. Later in the afternoon still, maybe 2 o'clock. You have 2 hours before you need to be back. You turn away from the river. There's a man watching you from the bottom of the levee. White, middling age, standing in a way that is either deliberately casual or not thinking about it at all, and you can't tell which. He's not anyone you recognise. You look at him for exactly long enough to register that you've seen him. Then you look away and walk back down the levee and turn toward the market and keep walking. Not running, not hurrying, just walking, with the particular quality of walk that says you are where you're supposed to be and going where you mean to go. He doesn't follow. He might have been nothing. He might have been curious. He might have been one of the policemen who patrol the quarter and have a professional interest in free-coloured women walking without obvious escort, because in certain parts of the Black Code there are still provisions, theoretically in varying degrees of enforcement, about the movements of free-coloured people. Or he might have been a man who looked at a woman and stared and meant nothing by it. You don't know which. You won't know which. This is one of the costs of moving through the city in the body you have in the year you're living in. The permanent not knowing, the constant assessment, the energy spent on threat calculation that never quite resolves into certainty. You buy a small paper twist of pralines from the seller whose voice you heard from the window this morning. He is an old man, dark-skinned, with a weathered face, and a way of handing over the pralines that is more like presenting them, like they're something worth ceremony, which in their way they are. New Orleans pralines are sugar and pecans and butter cooked to a specific temperature and poured out on marble to set, and the good ones have a texture that is neither crunchy nor soft, but something particular to this confection, grainy and yielding. The sugar taste of them has a little bitterness underneath, from caramelization, from the edge where sweet tips into something more interesting. You eat one standing on the banquette, and the sweetness spreads across your tongue, and it is good. It is genuinely good. This is one of the things that's true about this city. The food is genuinely, substantially good, not as consolation or compensation, just as a fact. Someone here at some point decided that cooking was worth doing properly, and then taught everyone who came after them. You eat the praline and watch a steamboat midstream and listen to the praline sellers call, and feel the sun on the back of your neck and think about Monsieur Villeneuve. What do you want? This is the question that doesn't have a clean answer. What you want operates in at least 3 different registers simultaneously, which is exhausting but is the condition of your existence, the condition of existing at the intersection of class and race and gender, and the particular social system of antebellum New Orleans. You want safety, economic safety, physical safety, the stability that allows you to exist in the city without constant emergency. An arrangement with the right man provides that temporarily for the duration of the arrangement. You want, and this is the register that's harder to name, to be a person rather than a position, to be known as yourself rather than as what you are, which is what most people see when they look at you, a category, a type, a function in a social system. The arrangement makes you more visible in one way and less visible in another, and underneath both of those, a third thing that you don't discuss with Josie or Madame or anyone, a third thing that came with you from the Treme neighbourhood and your mother's house and the specific education you got there that was different from the education Madame has been giving you. You want to leave. Not New Orleans, not exactly. But this, eventually, the arrangement, the house, the specific existence. You want what your grandmother built toward and your mother stepped back from, and what you are currently suspended somewhere in the middle of, the possibility of something more permanent, more recognized, more, you reach for the word and find it in French because French has it, plus propre, more your own. You know this isn't simple. You know this might not be possible. You know that the women who built arrangements and made them last and ended up with property and children with inheritance and a kind of stability, those women were skilled and careful and lucky in a particular combination, and luck is not available on request, but wanting costs nothing. And the afternoon is yours for another hour and 40 minutes. You walk back through the quarter, the streets change as you go, Rue Royale to Chartres to the Cathedral block, and here the city opens up around Jackson Square, which in 1857 is called Place d'Armes, still by some people and Jackson Square by others, the American name winning slowly. The cathedral anchors one end, St. Louis Cathedral, rebuilt after the fire of 1794, the current building finished in 1851 after renovation, its 3 steeples rising above the square in white and grey stone. The Cabildo is on one side, the Presbytère on the other, Spanish colonial buildings in the Louisiana style, their arcaded ground floors open to the street. The square itself has iron fencing now, garden beds, a statue of Andrew Jackson on his horse in the centre. Jackson at the Battle of New Orleans. The Americans love this statue. Some Creoles love it. Some people stand and look at it with expressions that contain more complexity than the statue deserves. You sit on one of the iron benches at the edge of the square for a few minutes. From here you can see the cathedral facade and through the gap between buildings a slice of the river. The light at this angle catches the white stone of the cathedral, and it seems almost to glow. The same trick light plays on good limestone when the angle is right, the building asserting itself in the landscape with the absolute confidence of Catholic institutional architecture. The cathedral has been here, in one form or another, since 1718, the current building since 1794. The bells have been calling the hours since before most of the living people in this city were born. They ring now, marking the half hour, and the sound fills the square and moves outward through the streets, and you listen to it with the specific attention of someone who's been hearing these bells long enough to stop hearing them, and is deliberately choosing to hear them again. The sound is generous. It doesn't care who's listening. Across the square, 2 white women in afternoon dresses are walking with a servant. They're dressed in what the current fashion calls crinoline, the enormous skirts, dome-shaped, held out by a cage of steel hoops underneath. The skirts are beautiful and completely ridiculous in August in New Orleans, which these women understand but are choosing not to let affect their choices. Fashion in this city is a statement of belonging to a world beyond New Orleans, to the wider Atlantic fashion world, and making that statement requires wearing what that world says to wear, regardless of whether it makes any local sense. You watch them walk. The servant, a young black woman, enslaved probably in this neighbourhood, walks 3 steps behind with a basket. She's not wearing a crinoline. She's wearing the same dress she wears every day. The 2 white women don't look at you. This is the careful social choreography of New Orleans's particular racial categories. The looking and not looking, the ways that visibility is managed. A free woman of colour in your dress and hat sitting in the square is visible and not visible simultaneously. You exist in a category that the city knows about but does not always acknowledge. One of the white women looks at you as they pass, not hostile, something more like curiosity or recognition without familiarity. She knows what you are in the categorical sense. She's probably met women of your category before in this city. She looks for slightly longer than strangers usually look at each other, and then she looks away, and they continue past. You don't look away when she looks. You learned that early. Looking away signals something you don't want to signal. The sun is lower. 3 o'clock. You need to start back. You stand, gather your basket with the tomatoes and the remaining pralines. You'll give the pralines to Veronique. She likes them, and you've had enough sweet for today. And you start the walk back to Rue Royale. On the way, you pass the print shop. It's a small shop with a window display that changes periodically. New prints and lithographs mixed with some older ones that have been there so long they're faded. The proprietor, an elderly man named Monsieur Duclos, who's been selling prints in this location since before the Mexican War, often puts interesting things in the window, and you've developed the habit of looking. Today there's a lithograph you haven't seen before. It shows the city from above. The river curving, the grid of streets, the cemeteries visible on the higher ground at the edge of the city. You can find Rue Royale in it if you look. You can find the cathedral. From this height the city looks orderly, comprehensible, a human system laid over the landscape with intention. From inside it, it doesn't feel orderly. From inside, it's a series of specific moments, smells and sounds and decisions that accumulate into a life. You stand and look at the lithograph for a minute. Monsieur Duclos appears in the doorway. "Lovely, isn't it?" he says. He's always saying things like this about his prints, not selling exactly, more appreciating out loud. "What year is it from?" you ask. "Printed in 54. The city's grown since then. They'd have to redo the right side." He squints at the print. The Irish Channel especially. All that building. The Irish Channel. Downstream from the quarter, the neighbourhood where Irish immigrants who came after the famine live in dense, difficult conditions, doing the labour that in a slave state gets designated to the expendable. The drainage work, the ditch digging, the levee construction, all the work that owners don't want to risk their valuable human property on. The Irish Channel has its own category in the city's social hierarchy, below you in some economic measures, differently positioned in the racial categories, the hierarchy complicated in ways that benefit some people and harm others, and make alliances strange. It's a beautiful city, you say, and mean it, and don't mean it, both simultaneously. "It kills the ones who stay too long," Monsieur Duclos says cheerfully, which is a deeply New Orleans thing to say, a kind of affection for the city's lethal qualities that locals develop as a coping strategy. But yes, beautiful. You continue walking. The afternoon is nearly done. You can feel it the way you can feel weather changing, the light starting its slant toward evening, the heat not less but different, the city beginning its transition from afternoon to evening mode, the restaurants starting their dinner preparations, the smell of garlic and onion, and the beginning of roux coming from kitchens, the day shift workers heading home and the night shift starting their preparation, and you, starting yours. Back at the house, Madame meets you in the hall. The tomatoes? You hand her the basket. She looks in, checks them with a practised thumb. Good, she says. Celeste. Celeste appears from the kitchen as if she was already in motion. The tomatoes, Madame says. Celeste looks in the basket, makes a sound of approval, disappears. Upstairs, Madame says to you. We have 2 hours. This is the part of the day that would be called, by people who write about this world from the outside, preparation. It would be described in ways that emphasize the cosmetic, the surface, the transformation. That's not wrong, but it's incomplete. What happens in the next 2 hours is labour. The bath first, which Josie draws with water heated in the kitchen and carried up in buckets. 3 buckets into the zinc tub in the washing room. The tub is barely big enough to sit in, and sitting in a zinc tub in August has the peculiar quality of feeling slightly cooler than the air, which is the best available, and you sit in it and wash with the soap that Madame orders from somewhere. Good soap. Soap that smells like lavender rather than tallow. And you wash your hair, which takes time, because your hair takes time in every direction, and you sit in the cooling water and listen to the street sounds below, and let yourself have this. The water cools, the street sounds continue. The praline seller, the distant bells, someone arguing in Creole French about something that ended 20 minutes ago, but they're still going. You get out of the tub and dry yourself on a good cotton cloth, and the air on your wet skin is almost cool. Your evening dress is laid out on the bed. Josie did this while you were at the market. This is one of the forms of cooperation that structures life in this house. The small services that women do for each other that don't have official names, that exist in the space between the formal hierarchy and the actual daily texture of living together. The dress is dark green silk, not the lightest silk, something with some weight to it, cut in the current fashion, but not the most extreme version. The crinoline frame is smaller than the fashion dictates. Madame has views on this, practical views. The enormous skirts require enormous space, and the rooms in this house are not enormous, and the bodice fits properly. This is Madame's most non-negotiable requirement, that the clothes fit. A poorly fitting dress on a woman in your position communicates something specific that Madame will not allow to be communicated. Josie comes in and does the back buttons that you can't reach. How are the tomatoes? Josie asks. Good, real ones. Good. I'm tired of the pale ones. She does the top button. There. You look in the small mirror on the wall. The mirror is adequate rather than large. Adequate for checking that things are correct without encouraging the kind of extended self-examination that wastes time. What you see, a young woman in a well-made green silk dress, hair dressed correctly, skin that is, you are a particular shade, your specific ancestry written in your appearance, something that New Orleans has elaborate vocabulary for that the rest of the country does not. The gradations of colour and their social meaning, the way your appearance positions you in this city's specific hierarchy. You're what they call, in the French, a free woman of mixed blood, and you look like it. And in this city at this time that means something specific, positions you in specific ways, and you know how to use that positioning and resent that you have to. You look good, Josie says. Not a compliment exactly, more an assessment. Josie gives assessments. Thank you. Villeneuve will like the green. I'm not dressing for Villeneuve specifically. You're always dressing for someone specifically, Josie says. That's what this is. She says it without cruelty, just factually. You know she's right. You also know that Josie, at 23, has spent 4 years in this house, becoming someone who says true things in flat tones, and it's not where you want to be in 2 years. Josie, you say. She's already turning to go. What? What was the name of the woman in Natchez, the one who retired with property? Josie pauses, turns back. Madame Broussard, my aunt knew her. How? How what? How did she do it? Josie looks at you for a moment with an expression that's unreadable, or readable in too many ways at once. She made one arrangement and she made it hold, Josie says. 20 years. The man died first, left her the house and a bank account. She was 40 when she retired. That's how it's done, Josie says. One arrangement, held carefully for long enough. That's it. She pauses. Or luck. She leaves. You stand in front of the small mirror for a moment. One arrangement, held carefully. You think about the calling card. Esplanade Avenue, cotton factors. Widower, one son. You think about the view from the levee, the river moving south, moving with the certainty of something that knows where it's going. Downstairs, Celeste is making something with tomatoes and something that smells like garlic and thyme, and the smell comes up through the floorboards like a message about dinner that nobody will eat properly until after midnight. The house is preparing. The house always prepares. You go downstairs. Madame is in the front room with Veronique, correcting something about the way Veronique is holding her hands. She doesn't look up when you come in. You'll meet Villeneuve in the front parlour, she says. 7 o'clock, before Arsenault arrives. You're giving me half an hour. I'm giving you what I have. She does look up now. Half an hour is enough if you know what you're doing. Do you know what you're doing? You've been asking yourself this question for 2 years. The answer keeps changing. The front parlour is on the street side of the house, the good room, the one with the better furniture, and the oil lamp with the coloured glass shade that throws amber light across everything and makes it all look slightly richer than it is. There are books on a shelf, Madame reads, and has opinions about her women reading, not the opinion that they shouldn't, but the more complicated opinion that they should read specific things, useful things, things that are about the world and how it works rather than novels about women waiting for something to happen to them. You sit in the chair that's positioned at the better angle, the one that faces the door so you see who comes in, and they see you as they enter. You've learned this. You've learned a lot of small things. The clock on the mantel, a French clock, porcelain and gilt, a little precious, not really Madame's taste but inherited with the house, ticks with the particular precise sound of a good movement. 10 minutes to 7. The city outside is shifting its register. You can hear it. The afternoon sounds giving way to evening sounds. Fewer street vendors, more music starting somewhere. The increase in carriage traffic as people move to dinner and the theatre and the evening social commitments. New Orleans in the evening is louder than New Orleans in the afternoon, which was itself louder than most cities in the country. This city turns itself up as the sun goes down. The mosquitoes are starting. August in New Orleans means mosquitoes at dusk, an annual certainty, and the windows have screens, Madame insists. But the sound of them against the screens is a specific evening sound, a thin, persistent buzzing that you've stopped noticing most of the time. The clock strikes 7. Madame opens the parlour door. Monsieur Villeneuve, she says. Mademoiselle Beaumont. He is taller than you remembered. 46, as Madame said, with grey at his temples and the kind of tan that comes from being outdoors regularly. A working man's tan, not a gentleman farmer's affectation. He's wearing good clothes, but wearing them without performance. The way people wear clothes that fit them and that they've had for years. His hands, you look at hands, you've learned to look at hands, are large and not particularly soft and have a scar across the right palm that's old enough to be pale. He looks at you, not the way some of them look, the survey that's more inventory than attention. This is looking as looking, actually seeing what's in front of him before he decides what he thinks. Mademoiselle, he says. His French is old Creole French, the kind that has layers, the kind that grew up here rather than arriving from France. It sounds like the street sounds different from newspaper French. Monsieur, you say. Madame withdraws, which is her gift. He sits in the chair across from you. Not too close. This is a man who knows how this works, who has done this before, who knows the pacing. You were at the Rouquette gathering in April, he says. Yes. I noticed you then. A pause. I should have introduced myself then. Why didn't you? He considers this without taking offence at the directness. I had some business to conclude. The timing didn't seem right. And now it does. Now it does. There's a quality to this silence that you're learning to read. Not all silences between people who don't know each other are the same. Some silences are empty, the space between two people who have nothing to say to each other and know it. Some silences are performing. The person on the other side of the silence is constructing something, managing how they appear. This silence has a different texture. It seems like a man thinking rather than a man managing. What does the business require, you say? This is not how these conversations usually proceed this quickly. But Madame gave you 30 minutes and you've already spent 5, and there is something about the way he looks at you that makes you want to understand what he wants before he's had time to present a version of it. He seems momentarily surprised. Then something in his face settles into a different expression, more direct. A consistent arrangement, he says, properly made and properly honoured. I'm not interested in something temporary or casual. He pauses. I had an arrangement before. 15 years. She died 3 years ago. Fever? You hadn't known this. I'm sorry, you say. So am I. He says it without performance. She was a good woman. I treated her as she deserved to be treated, and I intend to treat the next one the same way. This is the most important thing he could say, and he said it without being prompted, and you are trying to calibrate whether it's true. What does the same way mean, you ask? He looks at you again, that direct look. A house in Faubourg Tremé, he says. The neighbourhood where she had family, good quality, a household allowance, whatever arrangements for her education or her children she wishes. And the terms honoured in writing with a notary. In writing with a notary. This is the difference between an arrangement and a promise. In New Orleans, the plaçage arrangements are sometimes documented in exactly this way. A notarized agreement that functions essentially as a form of informal marriage contract, giving the woman standing and recourse that she wouldn't have otherwise. Not all men offer this. Some do. Children, you say. If God provides them, they'll be provided for. Educated, settled properly. This I will put in the document. You let this settle. The amber light from the lamp moves on the walls when the air shifts slightly, when someone opens a door elsewhere in the house. You're direct, he says. I've found it saves time. He almost smiles. Not quite, but close. I'll want to know you better before making the arrangement formally, you say. I'll want several meetings. I'll want to meet someone who has done business with you. Not a character reference you provide, someone I choose to ask. He raises an eyebrow. Who would you ask? I know people in the cotton trade, not your level, but connected to it. I can find out what I need to find out. He's quiet for a moment. Then he nods, once. Reasonable, he says. This one word, reasonable, tells you something. A man who says reasonable to that request is different from a man who says unusual, or who looks at you with the specific blankness of a person who has decided your request is irrelevant. Reasonable means he heard what you said and assessed it, rather than reflexively responding to the fact that you said something unexpected. You might be reading too much into one word, but you have 30 minutes and you work with what's available. The clock strikes the half hour. From the street the sound of a carriage. Monsieur Arsenault, who is Thursday, who is reliable in his different way. Villeneuve hears it too. He reads the sound and stands. I'll leave my card with Madame Renard, he says, if you wish to continue the conversation at your convenience. At my convenience, you repeat. Yes. He bows slightly, the Creole formality that is still observed in this part of New Orleans by men of his generation, and he goes out. You sit for a moment in the amber light. One arrangement, held carefully. Madame comes back into the parlour and looks at you with the expression she uses when she has assessed something and found it acceptable, but won't say so direct. Orchestrated substantial story continuation with character development and narrative progression. Orchestrated substantial story continuation with character development and narrative progression. Madame comes back into the parlour and looks at you with the expression she uses when she has assessed something and found it acceptable, but won't say so directly. Well, she says. Well, you say back. This is the entirety of your debrief. Madame doesn't ask how it went. She asks nothing. She reads what she needs to read from your posture, your expression, the particular quality of the silence you're sitting in, and she files whatever conclusion she draws in the ledger of her mind next to the other conclusion she has drawn about you over 2 years, and she acts on it or doesn't act on it as she sees fit. She's been managing women in this house for 15 years, and she knows more about how these conversations proceed than you do. She was, herself, a placé. She knows the calculation from the inside. What she sees now, whatever it is, makes her look almost satisfied. Arsenault is in the downstairs hall, she says. He brought oranges. He always brings oranges. Bitter oranges from his trees, which he grows at his house in the garden district with an enthusiasm that verges on the agricultural. Every Thursday he brings a small basket of whatever his trees are producing, which in summer is the bitter oranges and in winter sometimes something else. Pecans or figs or the cane syrup he has made from the small stand of sugar cane he keeps at the back of the property, which is an eccentric thing for an urban man to maintain, and which he does with visible pleasure. Arsenault is a man of 61 who's outlived 2 wives and a daughter, and most of his generation of friends, and who responds to this accumulation of loss by growing things. You know this about him. You've had, over the past 1.5 years, a great deal of time to understand Monsieur Arsenault. He is in the hall, where Madame said he'd be, the small basket of oranges in his hand, his hat already off, his grey hair neat. He is a man who was handsome 40 years ago, and is now distinguished, which is the better word for what happens to men who age well. He smiles when he sees you, a smile that is uncomplicated in the specific way that affection becomes uncomplicated when it has been around for a while and no longer needs to prove itself. You look well, he says. You brought oranges, you say. The last of them, I think. The tree's getting ready to rest. He holds out the basket. Celeste will know what to do with them. Celeste always knows what to do. This is the arrangement between Arsenault and Celeste, which is more direct and less formal than the arrangement between Arsenault and you. He brings things from his garden, and she incorporates them into the cooking, and there is no discussion about it because no discussion is needed. You take the basket and set it on the hall table, and Arsenault follows you into the back sitting room, not the front parlour where you met Villeneuve, but the room behind it that has less formality and more wear, the room where the books are actually used, and the lamp globe is slightly cracked, and the chairs are comfortable in the way chairs get after years of use. This is the room you've spent most of your time with Arsenault in. He sits. He pulls out his pipe case with the ease of a man who has been pulling out his pipe case in the same way for 30 years. You know this movement so well that you can anticipate the 3 seconds between opening the case and beginning to pack the bowl. The heat today, he says. August, you say. When I was young, we didn't notice it this badly, or we didn't have the sense to notice it. When you were young, you were on the Gulf Coast. That's worse. No, it isn't. You're right, it isn't. He lights the pipe. The Gulf wind at least moves. The tobacco smell fills the room in a way that is, after a year and a half, not unpleasant. It belongs here, in this room, with this lamp and this chair. Some smells are neutral until they become attached to something, and then they become part of that thing, and you can't separate them anymore. I had a meeting, he says. He says this most Thursdays. His meetings are with the cotton factors and the shipping agents, and the men he does business with in the Commerce Street offices, the part of his week that is entirely separate from this room and this lamp and these oranges. He mentions it the way a person mentions weather, briefly, not looking for engagement. How did it go, you say? There's a ship in from Liverpool with fabric samples, English cotton goods. He draws on the pipe. If those prices hold, half the city's traders are going to have a bad quarter. And you? I'm diversified. He says it with the satisfaction of a man who has been careful his whole life and found, at 61, that carefulness was the right strategy. Timber, not just cotton. The building is still going. You listen to this. You always listen to this, to the business talk that Arsenault brings the way he brings the oranges. The information about how the city's commercial world is moving, which direction the money is flowing and where it's sticking. You have no direct investment in any of it. But you listen. Josie once asked you why you bothered. She meant it as a real question, not a dismissal. You told her that knowing which way the river is moving is useful even if you're not on the river. She didn't say anything to that, but she looked like she was thinking about it. Arsenault talks about the Liverpool ship for a few minutes, and then the conversation moves the way conversations with him always move, gradually, without sharp turns from business to the general to the specific. He's a man who talks in order to think, who uses conversation as a method of processing rather than performing. You've learned to hear the difference between when he's telling you something and when he's working something out, and to respond accordingly. He tells you about his son. This is the part of the evening that requires the most of you, the most actual attention, because the son is a subject that Arsenault cares about with an intensity that is not casual. The son is 29 and in Baton Rouge and running the upriver portion of the timber business, and doing it, in Arsenault's assessment, inadequately. Not failing. Just not doing it the way his father would do it, which Arsenault intellectually understands is not the only way to do it and emotionally has trouble accepting. He's taken on a partner, Arsenault says. A man from Memphis. I've met him twice. I don't know what to make of him. What specifically bothers you, you ask? He considers. He talks too much about the future, about where the timber business will be in 20 years. These speculative men, they talk about the future and they don't do the work in front of them. Some people can hold both, you say. Some people. He taps the pipe. Can you read a man in 2 meetings? Sometimes, when he says something he didn't mean to say. Arsenault looks at you. This is the look you value in him. The look that is actually looking. The look that has learned over a year and a half that you sometimes say things worth attending to. What has the Memphis man said that he didn't mean to say, you ask? He said he could turn the upriver operation around in 18 months. That's what a man says when he's more interested in impressing you than in being accurate. So you've already made up your mind. I've made up my mind about the Memphis man. I haven't made up my mind about my son's judgment in choosing him. This distinction between the evaluation of the man and the evaluation of the judgment that chose him is the kind of precision Arsenault applies to things. It's why the business is still running at 61 when many of the men he started with are not. He's not always right. He's almost always precise. You talk about the sun for another 20 minutes, and then you talk about other things, and the evening settles into its shape. The lamp burns, the pipe smoke accumulates at ceiling height. The city outside continues in its evening mode. This is not a difficult evening. Arsenault is not a difficult man. There are other arrangements in this city, in houses on other streets, that are difficult in specific ways you've heard about from Josie and from a woman named Marguerite, who came through this house briefly last year, and left for a different kind of arrangement that paid more and cost more. The difficulty in those houses takes different shapes, some visible and some not. Some that announce themselves and some that accumulate quietly over months before becoming undeniable. Arsenault does not announce difficulty. His difficulty is the quiet kind, the kind that lives in the corners of the room and doesn't speak. And you've been in this arrangement long enough to know the corners of the room. After the pipe is finished, and the conversation has run its natural course, and the clock has moved through its own quiet business on the mantel, there is the other business of the evening, which is not talked about, and which takes the shape it takes. And afterward, when Arsenault is quiet in the chair and you are beside him with your hair loose again and the lamp turned low, he says what he sometimes says in this specific afterward quiet. I should set you up properly, he says. It's not right, this arrangement. He means he should make the formal contract, the house on a proper street, the notarized document. He's said versions of this before, has been saying them for more than a year, in the specific way of a man who means something and keeps not doing it, who is held by some counterforce he doesn't name. You don't have to, you say, because you don't push. You've learned not to push. Pushing changes things in ways you can't control. I know I don't have to, he says. A pause. I think about Marie, he says. This is his first placé, the one who died. He says her name sometimes in this afterward quiet, in a tone that has the quality of something he hasn't finished with. She would have been 48 this year. You let this sit. You don't say anything because there's nothing to say, because he's not talking to you exactly. He's thinking out loud in a room where someone is present and listening. She was 23 when I met her, he says. You're 21. I know. That's not. I don't mean it that way. A pause. I mean that I understand time differently now than I did then. When you're 35, 20 years seems very long. When you're 61, 15 years seems very short. You think about this, about how 15 years would put you at 36, about what 36 looks like from 21. The arrangement with Marie, you say carefully, Was it notarized? Yes. And you honoured it. Until her death. And afterward I've kept the house in her daughter's name. He pauses. Her daughter is 22 now. She lives in the house. You didn't know this. You know now. Then you know how to do it properly, you say? I know how to do it properly, he agrees. He says it not defensively, but like a man making an admission, a man acknowledging a gap between knowing and doing. Why haven't you, you ask, quietly? Not as a challenge, as a real question. He's quiet for a long time. The lamp flickers when air moves under the door. I'm afraid, he says finally, not of the commitment. I've made commitments. I know how to make them. He pauses. I'm afraid of what comes after commitment. He doesn't say more than that. You don't ask him to, but you understand what he means, or you think you understand it. The way someone of 61 who has buried a wife and a daughter and a placé might be afraid of the after. This specific vulnerability of investing in a future with someone when futures have kept ending. You have time, you say, less than I did. Still time. The lamp burns, the clock ticks. Arsenault falls asleep in the chair within 20 minutes, the way he does, the abrupt sleep of a man who is chronically tired and who allows himself in this room to be tired. You sit beside him in the low light and listen to the house. The house has sounds at night. All houses do, all old houses. All houses made of wood and plaster in a city that moves seasonally from flood to drought to heat to relative cool. But this house's sounds are also the sounds of women living in it. Sounds that come through walls and floors, footsteps and voices, and the specific quality of silence that different people maintain. From above, Veronique's room. She has a client tonight, a young man who comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, who is new to this and hasn't yet learned how to be in this world, who spends half his time apologizing for things and the other half making promises he intends to keep. Veronique handles him with a patience that Josie says will run out by spring, and you hope Josie is wrong. The young man is not bad exactly, just unformed. Most of them are unformed. They arrive with ideas about what this is, and they take time to learn what it actually is, and in the learning process they are sometimes difficult and sometimes surprisingly tender, and sometimes just clumsy. From across the hall, Josie's room. Josie is alone tonight. Her primary arrangement is complicated right now. A man whose wife has become more present and who has recalibrated his visits downward in frequency, which Josie tolerates with a pragmatism that you find both admirable and quietly sad. Josie reads at night when she's alone. You can hear, if you listen, the specific quality of silence of a room where someone is awake and not moving. From below, Celeste finishing the kitchen. The sounds of a kitchen being closed for the night, which are different from the sounds of a kitchen in use, more orderly, more final, the sounds of things being put where they go and fires being banked and surfaces being cleared. Arsenault sleeps. The city outside is at its evening peak now, the hour between 8 and 10 when the theatres and the restaurants and the opera and the public balls are in their main business. New Orleans has more theatres per capita than most American cities, has had since before it was American. The St. Charles Theatre, the most elaborate theatre in the country when it was built in 1835, burned down in 1843 and rebuilt, then burned again in 1899, the fires being a recurring motif in this city's relationship with its own grandeur, is just past Canal Street, in the American part of the city, where the Americans who arrived after the Louisiana Purchase built their version of New Orleans. The French Opera House, on Bourbon Street, where the Creole society maintains a different kind of cultural gravity. performing Italian opera and French opera, and the specific social rituals of an aristocracy that is not quite an aristocracy, but performs as one. You've been to the French Opera House once, in 18 months. Madame took you. It was an evening of Meyerbeer, Robert le Diable, and the theatre was full, and the performance was extraordinary. The soprano's voice rising in the second act to something that made the back of your neck go cold. You sat in the gallery, which is where you sat, and you watched and listened and felt the music doing what good music does, which is to make the room larger than it is, to expand the space behind your sternum into something that can hold more than usual. You think about that evening sometimes. The specific physical sensation of music that's large enough to change the dimensions of a room. From outside now, from the street, you can hear something. Music. A piano. From the establishment 2 doors down that has a piano and uses it. Not a church sound, not a formal sound. Loose and syncopated. A rhythm that belongs to the streets and the back rooms of New Orleans rather than the concert hall. The sound of a music that is still in the process of becoming what it will eventually be. That doesn't have a name yet in 1857, because it doesn't need one, because it's just the sound of New Orleans' particular musical atmosphere at night. Arsenault stirs but doesn't wake. You think about Villeneuve's calling card on the hall table, Esplanade Avenue, widower, one son, notarized documents. You think about what Josie said, one arrangement, held carefully for long enough. You think about your mother in the Treme neighbourhood, in the house with the carpenter husband, 3 children, a garden with sweet potatoes and an okra plant that gets completely out of control every summer. You haven't been to that house in 4 months. The distance is 2 miles, and it is not a geographical distance. Your mother knows where you are. She knew before you went. She was part of the decision in the way that women in her position are part of these decisions, not making them exactly, not preventing them, but present in the calculus, her opinion part of the weight on the scale. She didn't approve. She didn't forbid. She said specifically, "I have nothing to say that you haven't already thought of," which is either the most honest thing a mother can say or the saddest. You wrote to her last month. She wrote back, "The letter is in the wooden box under the bed with the other things that are yours." At 9 o'clock, Arsenault wakes up with the abruptness of a man who fell asleep unintentionally and is slightly embarrassed by it. "I apologize," he says, as he always says. "You're tired, you say, as you always say." He stands, straightens his coat, finds his hat. The process of leaving has a ritual quality to it that both of you observe without discussing. He gives Madame the envelope that Madame never looks at in front of anyone, and that contains what the arrangement is, which is not a service fee exactly and is not a gift exactly, but occupies the understood territory between them. At the door he turns back. "The Memphis man," he says. "Trust your son," you say. "Let him be wrong if he's wrong. It's how he'll learn to be right." Arsenault looks at you. "Is that what your father did?" he says. "My father wasn't around to do anything," you say, which is not quite true and is not quite false, and is the version of the story you use when this comes up. Arsenault nods once and goes out, and the door closes and you're in the hall. The house settles around you. Madame appears from the back room. "Everything all right," she says. "Fine. Good." She doesn't mean good in the congratulatory sense. She means it in the sense of information received and filed. Get some rest. Tomorrow there are errands. There are always errands tomorrow. This is also true. You go upstairs. The night is not done outside. The city's nighttime business runs until 3 or 4 in the morning, and the sounds of it come through the window, even with the shutters closed, because the shutters don't close completely. From this window you can see a section of Rue Royale and a piece of the sky above it. The sky that is never fully dark in this city, because the lights from the establishments along the main streets catch in the humidity and make the air itself glow faintly. You change out of the green silk and into the cotton sleeping clothes, and you unbind your hair, and you sit on the edge of the bed in the near dark, and you let the day arrange itself in your mind. This is another skill you've developed, the nightly accounting. Not of money, though Madame does that in her ledger. An accounting of information, of what you've learned and what you've decided and what questions remain open. It's a way of feeling less like things are happening to you and more like you are moving through things with intention, which is sometimes true and sometimes just a story you tell yourself at the end of the day, but the story helps. What you know now that you didn't know this morning: Monsieur Villeneuve had a previous arrangement that lasted 15 years, and he honoured it properly, and the woman died of fever, and he is offering to formalise a new one with a notarised document. Monsieur Arsenault is afraid of exactly the thing he keeps almost offering you, and he's been afraid of it for a year and a half, and he might remain afraid of it for a year and a half more, and you cannot wait that long. Josie's arrangement is getting uncertain, and Josie is maintaining her composure about this with the skill that costs her more than she shows. Veronique is 17, and pressing her own hair in the mirror at 5 in the afternoon, while you were at the market and hoping no one noticed. Celeste's fig tree will need picking in 3 weeks. The river is where it always is, moving south, moving with certainty. The man on the levee was probably nothing, or probably something small, not directed at you specifically, just the general ambient attention that men in this city direct at women in your position, the casual claiming of the right to look, probably. You can't know for certain. You add him to the list of things that remain unresolved and file him accordingly. The night sounds continue. The piano 2 doors down, still the same loose rhythm, unhurried. A horse on the street, walking pace. A conversation in Spanish. There are more Spanish speakers in this city than visitors expect. A residue of the years under Spanish colonial administration, old families who maintained the language through French control and American takeover. The conversation passes beneath the window and recedes. Josie comes to the door. She knocks twice and opens it without waiting for an answer, which is the established protocol between your rooms. Arsenault left early, she says. He was tired. He's always tired. She comes in and sits on the chair by the window, pulling her feet up under her the way she does when she's going to stay a while. She has her hair down, loose, and she looks younger than 23 without the formal arrangement of her daytime appearance. She looks like what she is, which is a woman who is also tired, in a longer-term way than Arsenault's tired. I talked to him about the arrangement, you say, about formalising it, and he talked about being afraid. Josie is quiet for a moment. He's going to keep being afraid, she says finally. That kind of afraid doesn't go away on its own. I know. Then why are you telling me about it like something might change? Because I'm considering the Villeneuve meeting. Josie processes this. You can see her doing it. See the specific quality of attention she brings to information that affects her assessment of a situation. Arsenault doesn't have the document, she says. Villeneuve says he'd make the document. Yes. One is a promise. One is a contract. Yes. You know which one is better. I know which one is more reliable, you say. Better is a different question. Josie looks at you with something that might be the beginning of respect for a person who has made a distinction she hadn't thought about yet. "Do you like Arsenault?" she asks. I know it's not the primary consideration. I'm asking a secondary question." You think about this. "I find him real," you say finally. "He says true things, even when they don't show him well." "That's not nothing," Josie says. "No. Villeneuve." He seemed like he was thinking when he was talking to me, not performing. Also not nothing. She unfolds herself from the chair, stretches. There's no clean answer. "I know. The clean answer is a carpenter husband in the Treme neighbourhood," she says, without cruelty, just as a statement of fact. "The clean answer was never available," you say. "I was available for a different answer." She looks at you for a moment, and then she looks out the window at the faint glow of the street. "What do you want?" she says. This is the same question you asked yourself on the levee this afternoon watching the river. You gave yourself 3 registers then. You give Josie one of them. "I want to be 40 and have a house and a decision I made rather than a decision that was made for me," you say. Josie is quiet. "That's a long time from now," she says finally. "I know, but it's possible. If I do this carefully." She nods. Then she goes to the door. "The Villeneuve meeting," she says. "Ask him about the house he'd provide before anything else. Not the money. The house. A man who'd put you in a good house in a good neighbourhood is showing you something about how he thinks of the thing. A man who offers money first and leaves the house vague is showing you something different." She goes. You sit in the near dark for a while longer. The piano downstairs has stopped. The street has gotten quieter. Not silent, but quieter. The specific quality of past and quiet in New Orleans, when the peak business of the evening has passed its height and is descending toward the hour when only the most determined insomniacs and the most committed revellers are still out. The river is still there. 3 blocks and a levee and an enormous mass of brown water that doesn't care about any of this. You lie back on the bed. The ceiling is 12 feet up, and you can't really see it in the dark, just the suggestion of it, the pale shape above you. The mosquito net around the bed is fine cotton gauze that moves in the slight air from the window, barely moving, just shifting its shape slowly the way a jellyfish moves in water. Your body has the particular ache of a day that had labour in it, that you don't always name as labour. The hair pressing, the walk to the market and back, the sustained attention of the evening, the 2 conversations with 2 men, the work of being present and readable and legible in the specific ways each conversation required. This is labour. It doesn't look like labour to the people who aren't doing it. To the men who sit in chairs and ask questions and receive attention, it looks like something else, something more like a natural exchange, like breathing. But you come upstairs at 10 o'clock with the same bone-tired feeling that Celeste comes upstairs at 10 o'clock, the feeling of having done work that the day required. You close your eyes. The river, 3 blocks and a levee, the orange trees in Arsenault's garden that he tends with the care of a man who has buried everyone he grew things for, the girl across the street this morning, sitting on the stoop with her hands in her lap watching, the cathedral bells that don't care who's listening, the tuberose smell in the market cutting through everything, your mother's letter in the box under the bed. Sleep doesn't come quickly. It rarely does, the first part of the night. Your hours are wrong, inverted from the regular hours of the city, and your body knows it and objects in its low-level way. The body's argument that the biological hours and the working hours don't match, that you should be winding down at 10 o'clock rather than just lying down. But sleep does come. It always does eventually. The city turns over beneath you. The last of the evening traffic on Rue Royale. A steamboat whistle from the river, a sound that comes through walls and distance and doesn't ask your permission. A sound that is just the river doing what it does, moving cargo and people and the essential business of the continent. Sleep. Finally sleep. In the dream you are at the levee, but the levee is higher than it should be, and the river is below you and you're looking down at it, not at the brown surface but somehow through it. And the river at the bottom is the colour of the sky above, and it's moving in both directions at once, which makes sense in the dream the way things make sense in dreams and nowhere else. Your grandmother is there. Not as she looked at the end, she died when you were 6, and the end is not what you remember. But as she looked in the photograph that your mother kept, young, arranged formally, looking at the camera with an expression that said she understood what the camera was and declined to be diminished by the understanding. She doesn't say anything in the dream. She just stands at the levee looking at the river that goes both ways, and her expression is the same as in the photograph, and the water sound of the river is the sound of the city at night, and you are asleep inside the sound. And that is how Tuesday becomes Wednesday. 3 days later there is a letter. It comes through Madame, who receives all correspondence. Another of the arrangements of the house, the protective layer of the intermediary, and she sets it on the hall table with the specific placement that indicates it's for you and she hasn't opened it, which is her version of privacy, which you accept. The handwriting is formal. A man who was educated in the old style, the French Creole style, the penmanship of a generation that considered handwriting a demonstration of character. Monsieur H. Villeneuve. He writes briefly that he has thought about the meeting and that he has a property he would like you to see. A house in the Treme neighbourhood, on Esplanade Avenue's quieter extension, currently empty, well maintained, with a garden. He writes that he would like you to see it before any further conversation, because he believes that a woman making this kind of decision should know specifically what the physical reality of the arrangement would be. He writes that there is no pressure, and that seeing the house does not constitute agreement to anything. He writes, "I understand this is your decision. You read it twice." Josie appears over your shoulder as if she was already there. She reads it and is quiet for a moment. "He said what to look at," she says. "He said to look at the house, and what he said to look for." You look at the letter again. He named the neighbourhood. He named the street. He said the Treme, you say. Josie makes the sound she makes when information confirms a hypothesis. "Your mother's neighbourhood," she says. "Yes. He knows that." You think about this. He knows your real name in the way that matters. Not the working name, but the actual name, the neighbourhood, the family, the context. He's done research. He knows what it would mean to put you 2 miles from where you grew up, in the neighbourhood where your family lives, in the neighbourhood where you could walk to your mother's house on a Sunday, and it would be a normal walk. Either this is a man who has done careful research to understand what would matter to you, or this is a man who has done careful research to find the specific thing that would move you toward a yes. You're not sure these are entirely different things, but you note the distinction. "I'll go see the house," you say. "Of course you will," Josie says. 3 days after that, on a Saturday morning, which has a different quality than Thursday, has the particular texture of a day when the city's business schedule relaxes slightly, when the streets have a different population, more families, more children, more of the ordinary texture of living. You dress in the good day dress and take your hat and tell Madame where you're going. Take your time, Madame says. She says this in the tone she uses when she's allowing something that is also information. The walk to the Tremie takes 20 minutes. You know every block of it, or you used to. Some of it has changed since you last walked it regularly. New buildings, a storefront that was one thing and is now another, the permanent minor renovation of a city in growth. But the basic geography is the same. The grid of streets that the French laid out and the Spanish maintained and the Americans inherited, the city that was planned rather than organic, that has an order to it that becomes visible from the upper levee or the lithograph in the print shop window. The Tremor neighborhood, the oldest black neighborhood in the United States. This is a fact about New Orleans that gets said in certain company and then sits quietly in the room while people decide what to do with it. Oldest. The free people of color who built this neighborhood built it before the American Revolution, before the Louisiana Purchase, before any of the political structures that currently govern this state had any existence at all. They built it, and they maintained it, and they created in it a culture that is specific and layered, and that contains Congo Square, which is on the edge of the neighborhood, where enslaved people were allowed to gather on Sundays, and where the music of West Africa and the Caribbean and the new American South all met and combined and created something that doesn't have a proper name yet in 1857, but will have many names later. Your family is from this neighborhood. Your grandmother was from this neighborhood. Her mother, who came from Saint-Domingue in 1809, found her way to this neighborhood because it was where the community was, where the free-colored society had its density and its mutual support structures. You walk into it now and the quality of the air changes. Not literally, and the air is the same August air, same heat, same river undertone. But the social quality of it changes. The way you're perceived on the street changes. The specific texture of being known versus unknown. On Rue Royale you are Mademoiselle Beaumont of Madame Renard's house. Here you are your mother's daughter, which is a different identity with different weight. You pass a woman who was your mother's neighbour when you were small. She looks at you and looks away without a change of expression, which tells you that she knows where you are. They all know. This is a community that maintains information about its members the way Madame maintains her ledger, carefully, precisely, with the understanding that information is survival. The house is on a street off Esplanade, a side street of older Creole cottages and newer shotgun houses, the architectural mix that New Orleans produces organically, each generation building in the style of its time on the plot next to whatever was already there. The house Villeneuve has indicated is a Creole cottage, one story, raised a few feet off the ground on brick piers in the New Orleans fashion, with a front gallery and shuttered windows and a garden in the back that you can see through the gate. It is not large. It is not pretending to be large. It's the size of a house where someone lives, not the size of a house built to impress. There is a key in the envelope with the letter. Villeneuve thought of this, or his agent did. The key is a plain iron key, nothing special. The kind of key that lives on a hook and gets used every day. You unlock the gate and go through. The garden is overgrown, not catastrophically. It hasn't been neglected long enough to be reclaimed entirely. The bones are still there. You can see what it was meant to be. But it needs work. There are climbing roses that have climbed beyond their trellis and are making independent architectural decisions about the back wall. There is an old banana plant, multiple stalks, the large leaves dusty. There is a small cistern, brick, functional. There is also a fig tree, smaller than the one in Madame's courtyard, younger, planted probably in the last decade. green figs, not yet ripe, the same hard, unready density as the ones you've been watching for weeks. You stand in the garden for a moment. The sound from the street is different here. The city is still there, still present, but muffled by the walls and the overgrown vegetation, reduced to a background presence rather than a foreground one. The garden has its own silence, the specific silence of a walled urban space, which is not actually silence but is the city at a distance rather than at your elbow. A mockingbird in the banana plant. They're everywhere in New Orleans, the mockingbirds. They set up in gardens and defend them with a ferocity that seems excessive for a medium-sized bird. This one looks at you from the banana leaf with the expression of a creature assessing whether you're a threat. "I'm just looking," you tell it. Flies away anyway. You go into the house. The rooms are small and high-ceilinged in the proportions that make small rooms bearable in the heat. The walls are plaster, recently whitewashed, still faintly damp in the smell. The floors are wide plank cypress, darker than the walls, the wood so old it's almost grey. The gallery faces the garden, and through the open shutters the garden light comes in horizontal and green-tinged from the plants. Someone has left a vase on the mantelpiece in the front room, empty but clean. You walk through each room. 2 rooms, a bedroom behind the front room, kitchen to the side. It's not complicated. It's the geometry of a life. You stand in the kitchen and put your hand on the work surface, which is marble, which is an extravagance in a house this size. Cool. Even in August it stays cool. Your palm flat against it, the coolness spreading. This is where someone would stand every morning making decisions about what to cook, about what to plant in the garden, about how to spend the day. The mockingbird is back. You can hear it from the kitchen, a series of calls that are other birds' calls, the mockingbird's theft being a kind of song, the thing it does being commentary on everything around it. You think about your mother's kitchen, the particular smell of it, the sweet potato vine she lets grow over the window in summer that turns the light green in a way that has seemed permanent your whole life, the specific green of that kitchen in summer. You think about Josie's advice. Look at the house first. The house is honest. It doesn't pretend. It's the size it is, and it needs the work it needs, and it has a fig tree in the garden, and a marble kitchen surface, and a garden that could be a garden again if someone tended it. You go back outside and lock the gate and stand on the street with the key in your hand. 2 houses down, a woman is sitting on her gallery in a rocking chair, shelling butter beans into a bowl. She looks at you without stopping the shelling. "You know that house?" you ask her. "Some," she says. "Who lived there last?" "A widow woman," she says. "Broussard family. She died in March." Broussard family. Madame Broussard from Natchez, who Josie mentioned, who retired with property, whose house is now empty. You look at the key. "She did well," the woman on the gallery says, going back to her beans, not a question. "She did," you say, because you think it's true. You walk back toward Rue Royale. The morning has moved on while you were in the garden. The city is in its late morning mode now, the peak activity before the midday slowdown, the streets at their most populated. You move through them with the ease of someone who knows them, who has mapped them in the body. The specific knowledge of a city that becomes physical rather than intellectual after you've lived in it long enough. You think about Arsenault sleeping in the chair with the pipe going out in his hand. You think about what it means to choose fear as your permanent address. You think about Villeneuve looking at you and saying, "I understand this is your decision," and you think about the marble countertop in the small kitchen, cool under your palm in August, the fig tree, the mockingbird, Back at the house on Rue Royale, you go straight to the back room and sit with the papers from the wooden box, the formal documents of your free status, which you take out sometimes and read not because you've forgotten what they say, but because reading them is a way of holding the fact of them. The paper is worn at the folds. The ink is old but clear. The notary's seal, which is what makes it real, is pressed into the paper in the bottom right corner. Your mother has a copy. Madame has a copy. You have the original. 3 copies of the document that says you are a free person, which you have always been, which the document exists to prove to people who might not believe it without a piece of paper, which is a state of affairs that you don't have words for yet in 1857, that aren't the words the language of your time provides, which are insufficient. You fold the papers and put them back in the box. You go find Madame. She's in the kitchen talking to Celeste about the tomatoes from yesterday, a conversation that has the quality of an ongoing negotiation about the correct way to prepare something, which both women are engaged in with the focused intensity they bring to most things. I want to write a letter, you say. Madame pauses the tomato discussion and looks at you. To Villeneuve, you say. Something in her face does not quite shift, but adjusts, the way a well-tuned instrument adjusts when you move it to the right position. There's paper in the desk, she says. I know, you say. You write the letter at the desk in the front room, in the amber afternoon light that is always coming in at a particular angle in August. You write it in French because that's the language you use when you're writing formally, the language that has the specific precision for this kind of communication. You write that you have seen the house and found it suitable. You write that you have 2 remaining questions, the specific terms of the document and whether he would consent to having the document reviewed by someone of your choosing before you sign. You write that you are prepared to continue the conversation if he is amenable. You write, at the bottom, I take this seriously. I believe you do as well. You fold it and seal it and give it to Madame, who will have it sent. Then you go upstairs and change into the cotton dress and sit by the window and watch the street. The praline seller is somewhere nearby. You can hear him but not see him. The call moving through the streets in its rhythm. Bells pralines, bells pralines. A sound that belongs to this city the way the cathedral bells belong, the way the river belongs, the way the mockingbird's theft of other birds' songs belongs. All the sounds layered. You sit in the window and you're 21 years old in New Orleans in August 1857, and the city is moving all around you the way it has moved all day, the way it will move after you, the way it moved before you, and will move again after you're gone, without concern for any individual life inside it, without cruelty or care. But you are inside it. That's the thing. You're not watching it from the lithograph in the print shop window. You're not looking down at the grid of streets from above. You're in the particular room, in the particular chair, at the particular window, and the smell of the river is in the air you breathe, and the praline seller's call is in your ears, and the letter is on its way to Esplanade Avenue. The next 3 weeks pass in the way of 3 weeks that contain something unresolved. They have their ordinary texture, the mornings, the afternoon errands, the evenings that follow their patterns. But underneath the ordinary texture there is something that hasn't settled yet, something that requires time to resolve into a shape you can name, Villeneuve writes back. The letter is clear and direct and answers your questions specifically. The document would contain provisions for housing, a monthly income, any children born of the arrangement, and a clause maintaining the house in your name for 2 years after the arrangement ends, regardless of cause. His lawyer, a Creole notary with an office on Chartres Street, would draft it, and would, yes, allow your review before signing. He names the notary. He names the terms. He is as precise as the handwriting on the calling card suggested he would be. You show the letter to Madame, not because you need her permission, because she has seen these documents before and knows what good ones look like. She reads it carefully. The provision for 2 years, she says. Yes. Marie Lebrun's arrangement had 3, she says, which is information without judgment, the way Madame packages most of her guidance. I can ask for 3, you say. You can ask. And the clause about children. Straightforward, she says. It's what it should be. She pauses. The notary he named. Monsieur Peyroux. He's reliable. I've seen his work. This is the highest commendation Madame gives to anything. Reliable. You meet with Villeneuve 3 more times before the agreement is made. Each meeting is in the front parlour, the same amber lamp, the same clock ticking on the mantel. Each meeting is an hour, sometimes a little more. He is consistent in his manner, in what he says, in the way he listens, which is a thing you notice about people. The quality of their listening, whether it's the kind that's waiting for you to finish or the kind that's actually receiving what you're saying. His is the receiving kind. You ask him about Marie, his first placée. He talks about her without softening it. She was a seamstress, he says, trained at a school in the quarter. She had her own clients independent of the arrangement. She made her money. She didn't depend entirely on what he provided. He says this as though it's a positive thing, which it is, and the fact that he sees it as positive tells you something. You ask him about his son. He says his son is a good man who makes different choices than he would make, which he's learned to accept. You ask him why he waited 3 years after Marie's death before coming to the Rouquette gathering. He's quiet for a moment. Then he says, because it takes time to know that you're ready for something and not just lonely. Those are different conditions. You write this in your head in the private ledger, where you keep the information that matters. The night before the meeting with the notary, you don't sleep until very late. Not from fear exactly. Not from doubt exactly. Something more like the fullness of a decision. The way a decision that's been made but not yet executed occupies a specific kind of mental space. Is present in your body the way anticipation is present. A low humming in the chest. You get up and go to the window. The street below is past midnight quiet. A man walking alone, hat down. The lamplighter has been and gone, the oil lamps that line the street at intervals giving them modest yellow light, enough to walk by, not enough to read by. The sky above Rue Royale has its faint city glow. 3 blocks away the river is doing what it does. You think about your grandmother, who came from Saint-Domingue with nothing, and made arrangements, and built something, and died in her own house. You think about your mother, who took a different path and built something different. You think about Josie saying, one arrangement, held carefully, for long enough. You think about the marble countertop in the small kitchen in the Tremé, cool in August, the fig tree in the garden, the unripe figs that will be ripe by September, that will need to be made into preserves by someone who knows how. You know how. Celeste taught you that first autumn, standing in the kitchen at Madame's house while the preserves cooked, talking to the figs in Creole French, and you standing at her elbow learning the temperature you needed to get to, the colour that meant done, the smell. You will make preserves in September, in the kitchen on the side street in the Tremé. The first year, and then the second year, and then you go back to bed. The city is quiet enough that you can hear, if you listen for it underneath everything, the sound of the river. Not a sound exactly, more like a pressure, a mass of moving water making itself known through walls and levee and blocks of city the way large things make themselves known. Not loudly, but with the persistence of something that has been there longer than anything else, and will be there when everything else is gone. 3 blocks away, always 3 blocks away. You close your eyes. Let sleep come back. Let the day arrange itself behind you into the past, where it can stop demanding attention and can simply exist, as all days eventually exist, as information rather than experience. Tuesday is already information. Yesterday is already information. And today, this complicated, honest, long day, will be information by morning. The city turns over slowly in the dark. Somewhere in the Treme neighbourhood, 2 miles and a world away, your mother is asleep in her house. The sweet potato vine is outside the kitchen window, waiting for morning. The smell of the place that was the first place you knew. You're 21 years old and you're not that girl anymore, and you are still that girl. And both of those things are true simultaneously. The way most true things require 2 positions to hold. Let it be true. Let the river be where it is. Let the night do what nights do, which is to hold the city while it rests, while the people in it rest, while the vast and indifferent and beautiful machinery of the place suspends its visible operations and maintains its invisible ones. The fires banked, the lamps dimmed, the accounts temporarily uncounted. Let everything slow. You are warm. You are fed. You are safe enough. You've made a decision that is yours, that came from your own accounting of your own life, that contains risk and possibility in proportions you can't fully see yet, but have assessed as well as they can be assessed. That's all anyone has. That's what life is in 1857 in New Orleans or anywhere else in any year. The next decision, made with the best information available, in a world that will not hold still and does not guarantee anything, and is beautiful and brutal in alternating layers like the streets of this city, the limestone banquette and the mud underneath, the iron lacework and the cracked plaster behind it, the cathedral bells and the river underneath the bells, always the river, always and always the river. Sleep takes you the way the river moves, without drama, with the certainty of something that knows where it's going. The night holds everything. The mockingbird in someone's garden is silent until dawn, and then it begins again. The bells, the praline cellar, the specific August light coming through the shutters that don't close all the way, the heat already present at first breath, this smell of chicory coffee from the kitchen, the city lifting itself toward another day. New Orleans in 1857, still here, still moving, still conducting its elaborate and impossible social arrangements, its beauty and its violence, its music and its commerce, its old families and its new arrivals, its free people and its enslaved people, its river that runs above the streets, and its streets that run through a swamp, its above-ground tombs for the dead who cannot be buried because the ground is too wet to hold them, all of it continuing, and you in it. And the fig tree in the garden on the side street in the Treme, waiting for September, waiting for the figs to ripen, waiting for someone to come and make something from what's there. Let it wait. Let it all wait until morning. Right now there's only this, the warmth of the bed, the sound of the city at a distance, this slow and certain approach of sleep. This is the only thing that's yours completely, the passage from this day into the next, the private corridor between waking and not waking that belongs to no arrangement and no system and no other person. Move through it. Let it take you. The bells will come when it's time. Until then, there's nothing required of you. Nothing at all, just this, just rest. Good night.